Every few decades, a new interface completely changes how we build companies. Think about it. The PC, the internet, the smartphone, and right now we're entering a new one, not just in AI tools, but in agents that can learn, reason, and act for us out in the real world. Today on the Founders and Builders podcast, we're joined by Akash Bajwa, investor at Early Bird Capital and one of the most thoughtful voices on how to build products and companies in the age of AI.
We're in an era at the moment where entire software categories are up for grabs. So the way you build a software company is far more consequential in determining your future success than it used to be.
This conversation left me absolutely buzzing. So if you're trying to understand what the next decade of software looks like, I hope it'll do the same for you. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, feel free to subscribe. And now let's get into it. Akash, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
So last time we spoke, you said that it felt today like pre-internet 1994. Why do you feel this way about the moment we have in AI?
So I think a good place to start is first outlining just how consequential AI actually is as a technology. So you can look at all the adoption data. You can see how ChatGPT is inflected and is growing at a far faster rate than all the historical consumer internet comparisons. And the picture is very clear. This technology is having ripple effects through society faster than any technology that's come before. And we're only a few years into the ChatGPT moment, so to say, which only further underlines the potential that's ahead. The comparison I made with the pre-internet era is to say, before the internet, as the classic example is, you just had the yellow pages going onto the internet, same form factor, same way of interacting with information. And then obviously it took us quite a while until we had the primitives in place, this sort of reflexive loop between applications and infrastructure that then birthed companies like Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, and so on, Google. So a lot of the today biggest consumer internet companies actually arrived several years into the emergence of the internet. And what's observable very clearly is that lag in diffusion isn't going to be as long with AI, but we're still in the very early days of understanding what is the best way to interact with this technology. So the field of human-computer interaction, I think, is very, very important these days because the classic sort of horseless carriage analogy of, are we actually thinking of completely reinventing the way we use computers, or are we just trying to swap out one way of interacting with our emails or any productivity software with some AI infused in it? It's time to rethink human-computer interaction from first principles. What is an AI native CRM, AI native email, AI native PowerPoint? It might not just be, sprinkle some AI on top and say, okay, edit this image or edit this text with AI. What about an AI that actually gives you all the output pre-generated, and then it's already read all of your past documents, it's read your past PowerPoints, it's highly, highly personalized, and you overcome this cold start problem. You're not looking at a blank canvas and just saying, okay, AI, generate this for me. That is just, I think, an early teaser of what's ahead, where great design engineers, great product-minded people are building in AI completely new, radically new experiences. That is, I think, the main way we can think about where we are in the arc of adoption of AI. I will obviously caveat by saying, despite being early in rethinking UI and UX, as said, ChatGPT is at 800 million monthly active users. So this is just how profound this technology is, but I think it's going to get more profound when people build the right form factor for personal assistance, the right form factor for workplace assistance. And there are several companies that already are paving the way there. So that's, I think, the way we can think about where we are today in the curve of adoption. I think there's still many years to go where people will continue coming out with completely new ways of using AI, infusing into our daily lives. But it's definitely going to be at a faster rate than the internet.
At Early Bird, you must speak to and see a lot of businesses that are coming to pitch you their AI company.
Hmm.
Early Bird, you've backed UiPath, N26, also some AI labs like Aleph Alpha in Germany, one of the foundation model builders. What do you think about when I say AI native company?
Yeah, I think this is the key question on investors' minds for the last few years. So I think if we take a step back, first of all, AI has obviously been a field that's been studied in existence and researched for up to 70 years now. We can trace it back through several winters and summers. And then now, this form of generative AI in the last 3 years has finally completely taken the world by storm. But I think it's important to acknowledge that folks like us who've been investing in AI far longer than just the post-ChatGPT era have also seen the degree of automation,
Mm.
the degree of efficiency gains that's brought about previously too with machine learning. So, just with that being said, um, it's clear that with generative AI, we're seeing um, levels of productivity gains and automation potential that just weren't possible before.
Mm.
And that's of course it's still very, very early innings of agents.
Mm.
They're going to become more capable. They're going to become autonomous in domains outside of the front runners like customer support and coding, and we'll soon see them for most enterprise workflows.
Yeah, a few customers
Um,
that I spoke to have said like customer service is the canary in the coal mine for AI.
Exactly. In the sense also that they're also it's the first domain where you see outcome-based pricing actually be agreeable for both the buyer and the vendor
Mm.
because attribution is easy. You can deliver the SLAs, and there's no ambiguity about what is a good outcome. So that's definitely the front runner, but I think the way capabilities are improving over time, we'll see it in other domains too.
Mm.
But to answer your question directly, so we think that the way you build a software company, both in terms of hiring, in terms of product, and then also in terms of taste, which has always mattered in the past, but is more important than ever today, um, is far more consequential in determining your future success than it used to be. So when we think about hiring and the org chart, the classic SaaS company by Series A would have a certain size employee base, a certain number of PMs, a certain number of designers, or a certain number of salespeople. All of that needs to be revisited. The way we hire, how many people you need, how are you going to even empower them with tools?
Mm.
What are they going to focus on? How to get leverage on their time?
Mm.
That's really, really important. And I've also spoken about this previously, but AI fluency is something that is
Mm.
a clearer and clearer determinant of the companies that are going to pull away.
Mm.
You already see this. There's these lean AI native leaderboards, companies that have several millions of ARR, and on a per FTE basis, they are blowing past historical best in class metrics for revenue, efficiency, etc. So that's the talent part. Then on
Yeah,
product.
think Cursor, think Lovable.
Exactly. Those are companies. Cursor's got 60 people, 500 million ARR. These are all public numbers. Lovable's also still even fewer people than that, 75 million ARR, darling of Europe. There are several examples of this out there. Bold Stackbits also falls into that. Then our product, as mentioned, we're in a era at the moment where entire software categories are up for grabs. So in the past, you would have had a lot of inertia for categories like the ERP or the CRM, ITSM, where you have massive market cap concentrated in names like Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday,
Mm.
Oracle. Finally, be potentially up for addressable because buyers are thinking, are these the vendors that are going to take us to the AI age? This is the first time where there's really a meaningful upgrade cycle
Mm.
happening because AI is that consequential as a technology and how it can permeate the product. But if you really want to counterposition against the incumbents, you have to reinvent the product experience.
Mm.
You have to be truly seen as a 10x better product, not simply a feature that Salesforce or Workday can easily bolt on. You have to reinvent the way that people onboard into the software, the way that they delegate tasks,
Mm.
and potentially um, have strong opinions on the way humans will only monitor and review the output of the work that these agents are doing. So designing form factor and autonomy scales for this new generation of vendors is what's going to make hundreds of billions of market cap potentially be addressable.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing is taste, which is really about a series of intentional decisions that are small discrete decisions, but that all add up to culture.
Mm.
And I think you can look at some of the greatest companies over the last 15, 20 years. Most people will say one of the biggest determinants of their success is the culture. And that culture is something that continues to attract the best people, that continues to shape the way users talk about it, the community, and so forth. But in AI especially, having taste in, for example, your developer docs,
Mm.
the boldness you take with your product and
Mm.
going fully autonomous, for example, these are all the kinds of intentional small decisions that add up to being perceived as truly the AI native vendor of today.
Yeah. And to follow on your point around like the size of the startup, not necessarily needing to be 10 product managers, 50 engineers, each employee individually now augmented by these AI tools and agents that are working on their behalf, even more importance on taste.
Yeah,
Because the
exactly.
scope of their impact of each individual person is much wider.
Exactly. So we've spoken about this before, but there shouldn't be any distinction anymore between non-technical and technical people. The tools that are available today and
I
the rate,
love this point, by the way.
which is absolutely getting truer every day, the tools that are available today and the rate at which they're improving means that anyone who previously had to send requests to their engineering team because they wanted an internal tool built or needed a bug to be fixed, for example, just has no excuse anymore. These tools are eminently accessible. You can onboard yourself. In any case, that is definitely the future and where we're headed, that everybody is empowered to build software. And when you consider the leverage that gives every person, we should all be potentially capable of delivering far bigger outcomes because the same person can do operations, business development, growth. So when you think about functional titles also, I think you've maybe seen several companies now have much more fluidity about titles because there isn't this silo anymore where one person just does engineering or one person just does growth. That can encompass many things. A lot of titles, in fact, the product manager title, some of the best growing companies today, 11 Labs, for example, doesn't have a product management function. There's a group of people that maybe do product related things, but there's no benefit anymore in just pigeonholing people into specific things because the tools at their disposal today open up this aperture where anyone can do several things and has far more leverage on their time. I think that's definitely where we're headed. And the companies that we're backing today, we're seeing that in the founding teams where the CEO maybe doesn't come from a technical background, but even they've learned how to write some code and use Cursor and use some of the front end engineering tools. So that's definitely the distinction between the companies that we think are going to pull away and the companies that might get left behind is that propensity to use these tools from day one and also foster that in every hire that you make.
But in real terms, because I want to make it really real for the listeners, how do you judge taste as an investor when you're looking at a founding team?
It's a series of small decisions that add up to form a congruent picture. So when you're meeting a founder, there are several choices that they're going to make. It could be the programming language that they use. It could be, of course, the user interface. Do they want it to be a chat interface? Do they want voice to be the modality for input? Why? Why do they think that that is the best modality for that end user? Do they want to have a fully self-serve onboarding, or do they want there to be a sales assist motion? A series of decisions on things like that, product related and some go-to-market related decisions, are usually very, very revealing of how a founder thinks about the world. Um, and we found that founders who have strong opinions can form that initial almost cult-like feeling where we are a company that stands for something. We believe that artisanal software is something that our users will love and will pay a premium for. We believe that extra attention to detail in the developer docs is something that that one developer up at 2 a.m. who's reading your docs is going to appreciate. We believe that even internally, the culture we build and the values we espouse aren't just hollow, but actually are lived by every person. And it obviously manifests in how those people then are motivated to continue shipping for the company. So you're looking for almost crossroads that the founder's been at and the decisions they took and why they took those decisions. When you're looking at this very early, of course, you might be looking at a pre-product, but you can already tell from some decisions that they've taken of um, how they even envision the product being built. What is the longer term roadmap? What is the order in which to build certain products? This is all taste. So I think as the evidence accumulates, of course, you have more artifacts to look at to see how that taste has manifested. Um, But even from the very beginning at the pre-seed stage, the founders that have taste will reveal that through the intentional decisions that they've taken. And then I think it's on the investors to also ask the right probing questions to unpack where that taste has already been demonstrating itself.
You started the software synthesis blog.
Yeah.
It's a Substack that's read by around 10,000, maybe even more weekly readers right now. Why did you start that?
Yeah, it's something that has become really integral to both how I work with founders, my journey as an investor. So the origin of this would be a few years ago, I realized that content is an important asset for several reasons in our technology world. First of all, I believe in the compounding nature of content that you write. Um, Content that I wrote 2 years ago still somehow surfaces when someone discovers it again in some corner of the world where I never thought I'd reach readers there. And it will continue compounding that way, hopefully for many years to come, which is beautiful. There's the natural serendipity of that, which is someone landing in your inbox that you would have least expected because via, someone forwarded to this person, that person forwarded to someone who you'd never imagined being in the room with. And if I step back and think about myself, and I always encourage all my friends to do the same exercise, I think we all have unique superpowers and we should lean into those superpowers. When I first started writing, people told me that my writing was worth their time. It was adding value to their inbox. And compared to some of my friends who are incredible at building relationships over networking events or conferences, that wasn't me. I learned that about myself in the first few years in this industry. But writing was a way of almost putting this bat signal out. Here's what I'm curious about. Here's the depth of thinking and research I've done into this topic. I would love to find like-minded people who resonate with this content, who are equally curious and who want to go down this rabbit hole with me and nerd out with me. And that's basically been the motivating factor all this time. And now 2.5 years later, it continues to be the main motivating factor. So there have been obviously other benefits that have come, things that I didn't expect, people even pledging subscriptions and so forth. I don't intend to monetize it, but it is primarily my vehicle of adding value to founders. What are the topics that founders are thinking about today in the age of AI, building companies in the age of AI? And those are the exact things that I want to thoughtfully present opinions on and continue covering. So yeah, that's definitely been pretty rewarding.
Super, super quick one from me. As you know, Founders and Builders podcast is a brand new channel. So if you're enjoying this episode and you want to keep up with the latest releases, feel free to hit subscribe down below. And now let's get back into it. So how we're going to do this episode, and I'm super pumped about this because I spent, as I've mentioned to you before, I spent the last 4 hours last night just trolling through your Substack. We're going to have 4 sections to the episode, each based on a different post that you made in the newsletter. And the first is on vertical integration in AI. And in there, you mentioned that a product that aggregates or collects user behavior is ultimately the most important data set.
Yeah, that's as true 3 years ago as it is today. So let's take a step back. When ChatGPT came out, or when everyone started looking at the AI landscape very closely in the last 3 years, at the very beginning, people believed that there would be this clear bifurcation between the layers of the stack. So you'd have model companies, you'd have infrastructure to deploy those models, and then you'd have applications. It felt like a very clean way of segmenting the landscape, and where you could easily determine, oh, is there competitive tension between these layers or not? Over the years, now it's become very, very clear that these lines are very blurry. The reason for that is that model companies realized the usage of their models is the primary way of differentiating in the long term. And that's the AI equivalent of network effects today. So the predominant consumer company clearly is OpenAI. And through the hundreds of millions of users they have, of course, collected RLHF data, reinforcement learning from human feedback, that is pretty much insurmountable by now for anybody else, because with that scale of adoption and engagement, they are going to likely be at the frontier of models for quite a while, and people have realized that they need to play a different game. So when you have this fact being plainly observable, it's in the interest of OpenAI to productize their models. And so where previously people believed that you'd see this emergence of all these application companies who would just be consumer of the APIs of the models, that's no longer true, because the incentives are not aligned for that. Model companies realize prioritization is the only way that they can be at the frontier of the models. Um, and so the main question to ask is your category one that the model companies want to focus on? In many cases, in many of the vertical cases, probably not. But it's early to tell, because, of course, now OpenAI has hired a CEO of applications, and it's become almost this holding company structure. But essentially, when we think about vertical integration, you can look at it even all the way down to the chips. So Google is probably the most vertically integrated company, from the TPUs to the compute to the models that they train, and then even the applications. So Gemini being rolled out across different Google applications. Of course, they failed at the last mile. The applications aren't good. I think most people today would agree with that. Although they have the best-in-class models, the best-in-class chips, and maybe then, of course, the best-in-class compute for training. So going forward, I think the key point to call out is that vertical integration is inevitable, because it is what results in defensibility in the long run. And so what we're likely to see is not only this direction of model companies moving up the stack, but companies at the application layer moving down the stack.
So who's an example of that? Have you got any that you've seen recently?
So Cursor would be the main example of this. So the CEO's spoken about this publicly, but Cursor is one of the biggest consumers of OpenAI and Anthropic models. But they've trained a series of custom small models around the large foundation models. And those custom small models are what make the difference between the incredible developer love that they have and basically a lot of the competitors who haven't been able to deliver that same level of user delight. And even though today they're not looking at training their own large foundation model for coding, they're in a really good position to eventually displace one of those underlying foundation model providers because they have already surpassed GitHub Copilot. They are the leading AI IDE, and if they continue shipping at the rate they are, they will have the most usage. And that, as I said, is really the data that allows you to train the frontier model. It's just a different question of whether they will have a relationship with one provider who maybe doesn't want to productize that way. That could be Google. And Google says, okay, we're always happy for Cursor to be an application company that owns all developers in the world. And we're focused on different personas. With OpenAI, I don't think that's going to be the case. With Anthropic, there's already some evidence of that, which I pointed to in my writing, that they, for a short while, cut off access to their models. And they've since resumed access, so to be fair. So yeah, I would say Cursor is an example of that. I think we'll see some more examples, but there are not many categories yet where there's such a clear frontrunner and market leader. When there will be a market leader with that level of dominance and user mindshare, the data that they're collecting is really what gives you an unfair advantage.
And then that data alone may not be so valuable, but one of the things that you talked about in a post recently was the evals are the moat. So let's go back all the way to basics for somebody that hasn't, come from a machine learning background. What is an eval and why is that important?
Yeah, so if you want to deploy AI into production, it of course needs to meet certain baselines on accuracy, on helpfulness, toxicity, certain dimensions where if you aren't delivering a certain level of performance on those dimensions, you would risk potentially damaging your brand. NPS goes down and customers churning. So it's also why we're typically seeing in the enterprise AI workloads still being pre-production, although they will go into production hopefully this year. Evals are one of the key unlocks for getting AI workloads into production. And what that actually means is effectively testing that you do pre-deployment. So you have your, let's say, customer support AI product. It might at the very beginning be just a model API that you're calling, and then you add some customization. You might do RAG over your internal documents.
RAG?
Retrieval augmented generation, which is where you're injecting relevant context that might be stored in a vector database. And that context is, for example, your past support tickets or your knowledge base.
Got it. Something that's proprietary to my company or my customer.
Exactly. Which is stored internally and it needs to be formatted in the right way to be consumed by models and basically be the context that you put in the context window so that the answer is more accurate. And so you have these stages of development. You have simple model API, you add potentially retrieval augmented generation, some fine-tuning, efficient fine-tuning, all these techniques to get to the final, what you hope is a production-ready application. Then you have to do some testing. The pre-deployment testing is what we call evals, or let's just call it evaluations. Evals is, I think, just the way people in our world like to be cool about it. So evaluations are where you want to test the model's outputs against a series of potential user prompts. And there's a series of steps that you'll undertake to run this process quite frequently. So on the one hand, you want to build a golden data set. A golden data set is maybe written by a subject matter expert in that field. In that customer support example, it could be someone who's a very experienced customer support specialist. They will write down a series of prompts that they typically see. So the ones that are usually in distribution or very common, and even the ones that are usually quite rare and might not be captured if you just look at historical tickets. And then they'll write a series of answers that are the correct answers. This is what you could call the source of truth. So the highest fidelity representation of truth. What you want to do is store that golden data set. And then you want to also effectively eventually train a large language model that will be a judge model. And that judge model will then evaluate the outputs of your application. And the way you train that judge model is also by using this golden data set. Over time, what you'll get to is a continuous integration, continuous evaluation, the equivalent of CI/CD workflow, where you're running evaluations every day. The point of this exercise is to say, all the potential inputs that users will put into a product have been checked for whether the output is complying with the metrics we care about around accuracy, helpfulness, as I mentioned. And you'll probably compute a score for these. And every time you make a change, say you swap out OpenAI's models for Gemini models, or you change the RAG pipeline that you've set up, or any specific parameter that you tweak, you do run a risk that the performance regresses. So you need to run this workflow and on a frequent enough basis, and certainly when you make a change, to see that you're still meeting the baseline for production readiness. This is something that all founders and companies like to say is their moat, this Evals data set that they construct.
The golden data set.
The golden data set, exactly. That is the way to think about Evals. Evals is something that confers a advantage, but it's ephemeral. It's not going to last. You need to build the infrastructure to run Evals, perhaps nightly, weekly, whatever.
Yep.
And those are the companies that are going to have that sustainable advantage.
When you mentioned the customer service example, I think, maybe even just a pre-trained, let's say GPT-4o could take a look at 100 customer service tickets that I send it and rate potential actions that I need to take based on that, or whether this is something that we can respond to within 24 hours and give a yes or no. But I think where this gets really interesting is where you move into the spaces where the model hasn't been pre-trained on information that would allow it to make that call. I'm thinking life sciences, like being able to detect with these multimodal models whether a certain scan image has a cancer tumor in there or not. And that this feedback kind of flywheel between the machine learning engineer or the kind of business user and the subject matter expert, it's a long, arduous process of getting that feedback.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. And I think even more important is there is a level of post-training that can happen for foundation models. So just to make this very simple, you have the pre-training phase that happens for a model like GPT-4o, which if you were to release that model into the hands of consumers would be unusable because it wouldn't be conversation friendly. The post-training that a lab like OpenAI does is effectively reinforcement learning to make it be very obedient at following instructions. And in extreme cases, it becomes sycophantic, like we've seen in recent weeks, where that's maybe overcorrected. But the point in being, if you want to give it domain expertise about a field like medicine or the legal profession and so forth, some of that work can be done in post-training. There are several avenues to get to the same goal. You can even do pre-training of very small models. The reason for that is if you look at the large foundation models today, the very frontier models, they're trained primarily on public data. They're trained on Wikipedia, Common Crawl, certain data sets that, of course, are missing all the proprietary higher value data that's living inside a bank, a law firm, a leading American law firm, let's say, or a hospital or a healthcare company. That is a data that actually drives much more of the performance gain, even though it's smaller in quantity. And that is what then drives the argument for smaller models that are not maybe as intelligent at most other things, certainly nowhere near as intelligent as like a GPT 4.5 on the majority of tasks. But in that one specific field where you train it, and it could be a 7 billion parameter model, so a tiny, tiny fraction of the frontier models today, it's going to be very, very good at that task and that task alone. It'll be very good at legal research. It might be very good at image classification in healthcare. So there are several ways to get there. You can post-train a large model, which might be more costly when you run inference on it, or you can train a very small model. And I think this is a bit of a non-consensus take, but I think we will see more of that in the enterprise.
Let's switch it up now and talk about MCP, which seems to be all the rage at the minute. So last time we spoke, it was 2-3 weeks back, and you said, "Hey Joe, have you tried plugging all of these LLMs in through MCP?" And I was like, already I felt behind. Another thing that's come out that just as I thought I was getting ahead of the curve,
Yep.
you were the first person to set me back. But help us understand, like, first let's define an agent, and then let's go into why MCP is powerful and where it's maybe shown up in your work and your life at the moment.
Yeah. So the definition of an agent is it is really worth grounding on that, because I think people throw it around very loosely. I think agent is best defined as autonomous software, something that does a task for you. It doesn't. The juxtaposition with a co-pilot would be a co-pilot is enabling the human to do something. An agent is actually capable of doing a task, hopefully end to end. And over time, I think the range of things they will be able to do is going to increase massively, and it's just a matter of time. But as most people have found, when you're trying to actually get the agent to do anything meaningful, you realize it has to call a lot of external tools, internal or external tools. Either an agent that needs to potentially come up with a strategy plan, let's say, for your company, needs to have access to your internal wiki, which might live in Notion. It needs to read Slack messages. It needs to read a bunch of other internal information. An agent that's doing financial analysis needs to maybe fetch certain SEC filings, fetch certain metrics that are online and published in different sources.
Look at your sales data. What are you spending on marketing?
Yeah, exactly.
That currently lives in many different systems.
Exactly. And maybe the better abstraction of this is that agents need access to data. This data resides in internal and external tools. Previously, before MCP, the way that an agent would interact with these tools was not ideal. You had some tools that didn't have very friendly APIs. They certainly weren't APIs that were even optimized for agents. With APIs, you also get some of the drawbacks of following very strict formatting in terms of input requests and what goes into the payload. And agents were often failing in production or were very buggy for this reason, that whenever they did tool calling is effectively invoking one of these data sources, they would run into all kinds of errors. So Model Context Protocol, which was released last November by Anthropic, is kind of like the hypertext transfer protocol of the internet, which is effectively governing how data is transferred between a data source, which, as I said, could be Slack, it could be Notion, linear internally, and your agent.
It's like the agent equivalent of a REST API.
Yes, exactly. And up to that point, some services might still be consumed via REST API because there aren't any issues with it, and it's richer in terms of things that it can read to determine what's the best way of using this service. But for many other service providers, MCP has been a big unlock. And so MCP is effective in an abstraction on the API that is unified and consistent across all these service providers. And everyone that's built an MCP server, which is effectively that wrapper on your API, is trying to expose their data in the best way possible to agents. And in this example, the agent would be the client. And you can think of commonly Claude is a client that would interact with Google Drive as a server. And then these servers can be both local on your machine, or they can be remote on the cloud. And yeah, it's taken the world by storm. I think for the first few months, actually, it didn't make much noise. And then I would say in Q1, you could see an inflection point. And by now, it's obviously seen adoption by OpenAI, by Google, and it has become the ubiquitous standard for agent tool interaction.
We mentioned last time we spoke this kind of intersection between agents and MCPs, the ability to use tools, act autonomously on your behalf. But also you refer to how stablecoins are kind of through micropayments and the need for these agents to be able to record deposits and withdrawals against each other. That kind of these micropayments powered by stablecoins may be a an interesting angle. Could you take us all the way back to the first principles?
Yeah, the first principles of this would be, first of all, stablecoins on their own are having a moment today. In the last, I would say, year or so, the momentum has been really, really wonderful to see. Which, if we really just spend a moment there, what are stablecoins? They're digital dollars. They can be any currency, but they benefit obviously from the properties of being entirely programmable, on chain, and with the benefits that brings around, um, latency, moving money at almost no cost. Um, so
And I'd love to go for the folks that are not so familiar with the cryptocurrency space and why
Sure.
stablecoins are valuable.
Yeah.
Let's just break it down. Like on-chain means immutable. So if any
Yep.
changes are made to the ledger, every node in the network can see it,
Exactly.
and that you can't have one bad actor, namely a central bank,
Yep.
derailing the whole system.
Exactly. That's right. And the networks that these stablecoins run on, commonly Ethereum, there are stablecoins for other blockchains as well, are obviously distributed enough that indeed there's almost no possibility for a single actor to derail these networks, and that is ultimately the whole point of being decentralized. So we're seeing stablecoin adoption from fintechs. We're seeing stablecoin adoption by corporates. Some of them are issuing their own stablecoins. Um, and then if you also add the other primitive, so stablecoins will be one primitive. The other primitive is non-custodial wallets, which in the crypto summer of 2021, 2022, I think many normal retail investors had their first moment with some of these non-custodial wallets, and realize still that it is actually a lot of work to manage your keys, to sign transactions, to get familiar with an entirely new way of transacting on the internet. But even there, we've come quite some way, and actually you see far more user-friendly interfaces. And I'd call out companies like Sling Money from Mike Hudak as an example. He was a CPO at Monzo, and he's building a fantastic consumer grade experience for sending money via stablecoins. It's very Venmo like effectively. So bringing it back to agents. So when you look at some of the properties that the blockchain, non-custodial wallets, and stablecoins have, which are programmability, i.e., release funds if this condition is met.
Smart contracts have as a
Smart
whole.
contracts, exactly. Then you obviously have the fact, as you just said, that stablecoins can be infinitely divisible into the tiniest unit, because again, it's internet money. And then the latency and cost of moving money. You're not paying Visa or MasterCard. You're not paying the scheme fees. You're not paying many of the other middlemen that have entered the payments value chain over decades. So when you combine those things with how developers today are maybe paying for MCP servers, there's a really interesting use case there, and Coinbase is doing a lot of work here with their layer 2 base, to enable payments for MCP servers via stablecoins. And then if you just imagine, the unit you're consuming by an MCP server might be a tiny, tiny piece of information you're requesting from a data source. Why should you have to charge a sum that isn't infinitely divisible? Why couldn't you charge a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of
a cent?
Of a cent, exactly. And so you want to enable this ability for elasticity up and down. It could also not just be the fact that it's a tiny percentage of a cent. It could be to 10 decimal places a certain amount when you're consuming only a certain amount of a certain tool. And when you just think about it from first principles again, an agent is going to call several tools when it's conducting a task. Those tools could be consumed in any number of units, as I just said. But when we think about all of the agent workloads that will come into the economy over the next 10, 15, 20 years, this is going to be huge. You'll have some services that are consumed to that tiny, tiny fraction, to a very exact percentage point, for this workload. And then this other weather API is consumed into this amount. But it seems like it's trivial that we're thinking about these very, very exact numbers. But when entire economies are run with agents that are booking your travel, that are booking your education, and so forth and so forth. This all adds up, and this will be a property of stablecoins that is beneficial for a lot of agent developers and the service MCP server developers. So I think it's still a bit nascent, and it's not clear yet if it's going to be the main rail that agent commerce runs on. But there's some really interesting stuff happening there.
If we fast forward 10 years, what do you think will be normal there that we think is crazy today?
Yeah, first of all, the rate of change is faster than ever. So if you had asked me this question in 2015, would I have predicted where we are in today? Probably not, but I think it's even harder to imagine where we'll be in 2035, just because of the several technology waves that are coinciding. Let's not forget, cloud is still happening. We're still 40% only of workload.
Cloud, not Claude.
Cloud, exactly.
Because I sometimes get confused when my German friends go...
Exactly. We're in the AI days, so who's even thinking about cloud anymore? But yes, the cloud transition, which has been unfolding over the last 2 decades, is still actually unfolding, and it's happening at a modest rate. Then you still have, as we just touched on, some pockets of crypto that are also getting momentum. Then you still have many, many parts of the world that are still getting access to mobile for the first time. And then now you have AI, of course. So you have several technology waves coinciding, but AI being obviously the most profound in terms of the rate of adoption, diffusion across society, and so forth. So if you combine all these things together, I think personally, what I'm quite excited by is the potential of computer using agents. I think they'll already be ubiquitous well before 2035. But the way we will be able to instruct them via voice and have them be accessible in our daily lives, we'll be able to also interact with these agents through wearables. I think something like the Meta Ray-Ban is going to take off, and there will be a new way beyond the smartphone. I think the Johnny Ive acquisition has already teased a device that isn't a phone. There will be new ways we'll interact with the technology. I think glasses is a good form factor, so we will probably be all wearing glasses, recording our entire day, and like a Black Mirror episode, rewinding back.
Episode, yeah, with it's not even a contact lens, it's a chip in the brain.
Exactly.
By which you can,
The chip, that's just the part where I'm a little bit still reluctant to say that it's going to happen in 10 years, because I think there's some wider implications of that might take a bit longer to process. But glasses are fashionable, and just there's less resistance, I think, to adopting that as a form factor. You'll have people wearing these glasses. You might have a device in the home, the new version of Alexa, but obviously far, far more intelligent, far more personalized to you, far more aware of everything about your life. I think what's probably then a natural conclusion is like, what are we all going to do? What work is left? I mean, you'll have hyper intelligent agents that know everything about your company, that know everything about you.
It feels already, just sorry to interrupt, but it feels already that even in simple workflows, I, as the human in the loop, I'm the bottleneck.
Yeah.
Right? I'd love it if the AI could just ask me, what is all of the context that I might need to know to do this thing?
Yeah.
And just let me know how it's getting on.
Yep.
But I constantly feel that like the rate limiting factor in how quick I'm able to build whatever I'm working on is me right now.
Exactly. And we will probably get to a point where instead of waiting on the human to give instructions and review the work, the agents will be proactive.
LLM as a judge just applied.
Exactly. They have context about your company. They have context about all the historical patterns of usage. What have been the tasks you've delegated to it? Knowing as much as they will about us and our companies and our enterprises and our endeavors, they'll of course not be reactive any longer, and they'll be proactive. They will make suggestions. Hey, you should launch this product because based on all the tickets I've read, this is the feature request we're getting the most. Hey, you should rejig your go-to-market org because clearly you don't have a top of funnel problem, you have a conversion problem, etc. The exact thing is that currently management teams, boards sit and study their data to decide is going to be something that isn't going to be an exercise of like, let's mine data to find out what to do. But agents actually just telling you, and then eventually you'll trust these agents so much, they won't even just suggest it to you for you to approve. They'll just do it because you just think that they have the smartest judgment of anybody in the company. That's an interesting world to be in. I don't know where that leaves the shape of companies, what people will be doing. I think the more, I guess, romantic version of all of this is that some version of AGI is going to lead to scientific breakthroughs in critical fields.
We might amazing companies that we're seeing at the minute. Think about, Charm Therapeutics, Isomorphic Labs, all the great work from the research teams at DeepMind, and more and more.
Absolutely. And those are all going to have lasting impacts on all of our lives in ways that I think we would all be hugely grateful for diseases like cancer to be hopefully mostly cured. And then perhaps we'll actually finally be a interplanetary species and we'll be able to also save the planet and so forth. So there's all kinds of lofty goals that will be finally potentially realizable. But I do think there are going to be other decisions around how you order society in a world like that, where maybe the definition of work changes. Far beyond Me Too.
Like it already is. Like that. It feels like it already has. Yeah,
it's happening. We are obviously we're in the driving seat to see this. I think we see it in our companies in terms of their ability to delay hiring certain people because the tools at their disposal are arguably as good, if not better, than some people they could hire. And I'll see it. We're going to see it in the investing profession. It's going to happen in the technology industry, obviously, at the very beginning, because we're at the vanguard of all of this. And so I think we'll have a front row seat to all of this. And 10 years is actually a long time, I think, in today's world.
It's probably like dog years, isn't it?
Yeah. I think if you and I look back at this conversation in 10 years, we'll be surprised how our
Are we going to have this conversation again in 10 years?
Well,
when we're all in UBI and we don't have a purpose?
Yeah, I mean, then we'll just be recording podcasts.
That is the rest state equilibrium of the universe, just recording a podcast.
It's too fulfilling to give up.
Nice. Cool. Which founders and builders are inspiring you in their work at the minute?
An example I definitely would give today that personifies a lot of what I've said is Chris from Granola. So if you look at what Granola is, it's meeting transcription. There have been many meeting assistants that have been around for years. This is the first one I actually started using and have been ever since a very loyal user of. And if I had to really pin down the reasons for why it's been so successful, it's all the reasons that I think determine the winning companies of today. Taste. This company has taste, and you can see it all the way from product design to how they run the company, how Chris also thinks about the future of human-computer interaction. They stand for strong opinions about that. It's also the rate at which they ship. Velocity has always mattered in startups, but it's more important than ever. And this is a company that stays close to the bare metal. What I mean by that is if there's a new speech-to-text model that they need to quickly roll out and support, they'll do that. If they need to add a better model to do research, potentially, I imagine they'll also do that. And then last, I think they're a company that is very close to the customer. So they listen to their users and the rate at which they incorporate feedback into their product roadmap, I think is a great example. I'd also look to Cursor as a fantastic example, lovable. I think what all of these founders have in common, so between these three companies I've named, but even 11 Labs, Mati, is first of all, again, they're very small companies for where they are. And so they've clearly adopted this AI fluency mindset from the beginning. And I think they each want to be standing for a set of values again, which I said, if you look at Anton, he's been very clear about, this is maybe the last piece of software
Yeah.
that will be written.
Mm-hmm.
That is a bold vision.
Mm-hmm.
And he's always been very vocal about attracting math Olympiads, rebels, outcasts, people that maybe don't belong in conventional circles, but would thrive at a place like his company. And I think not enough founders do that. Not enough founders intentionally put themselves at odds with the rest of society and say, look, we stand for a certain set of beliefs. We're maybe in that sense outcasts and rebels. But come join our tribe if this resonates with
If
you.
this sounds like you.
Exactly. And that is how you get an incredible hiring funnel. That's how people actually know to think of you when they're considering which company to join. And ultimately, I think you're going to have then the best talent density. And if I step back from everything we've talked about, the most important thing in determining a company's success is talent density. Talent density is what then obviously results in the best product, the best go-to-market, and so forth and so forth. So most of a founder's time is spent hiring. All of these downstream things that we're trying to optimize can be significantly improved if you have the best talent density. And talent density, of course, is then on the founder. And the founder can have a big outsized impact on that talent density by being opinionated, by having strong views about the world, how the world's going to develop, and how their company is going to have a lasting impact and become a generational company. So I think those are some of the founders I think that have done that extremely well.
I love to your point around taste and that talent density is upstream of basically everything else that helps.
Yep.
That leads to that, like product functions, what product gets built, who our customers are.
Yep.
All decisions still made by people until that changes.
Yes.
And I watched this recent podcast episode with Nick, founder of Revolut, and when he talks about finding those super high leverage, high taste individuals, he describes them as like, it's very easy for him to see early on in the hiring process that they feel to him like self-guiding missiles.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful way of putting it. It's someone else also exactly said it like that. Heat-seeking missiles. The people, especially that you hire on the premise of talent and not experience, they're going to grow far faster than and I also typically fall in that camp, hire for talent and not experience. They're going to grow far faster and, find the heat wherever it is in the company. What is the fire to put out? What is the burning problem? What is the bottleneck that can be removed to growth? Than someone who comes in with experience. That's not always true, but by and large it's true, especially in the early scrappy days of a company. And yeah, you want to give people like that agency. You want to let them run with it. And obviously that places more and more importance on recruiting them and finding them and interviewing them and not misjudging who would be a good fit for a culture like that. And again, I think for founders, and we're seeing this real growth in founder-led content, founders posting on LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. You could post things like how fast you're growing. You could post things that speak to your values, how you see the world. These are all ways of resonating with someone across the ocean that they should fly over, leave their life behind, and join your company. So I think that's, again, the way Nick put it, I think is wonderful, and I think is also consistent with those other founders.
Yeah. Just on the point of crisp, because I think it's super powerful. When you think about granola and the space that they were building in, we hear time and time again, well, you're building a feature or a product that will just be a subtool within Google Gemini because Google has Google Meets, or they could have a plugin with Zoom. And the kind of meeting recorder layer is going to be completely commoditized. There's no value there, tons of startups, no revenue to be made. Why do we keep using granola? And it goes exactly back to what you talked about earlier.
Yep.
They've built the best product. How? Because of the little details.
Yep.
Which means that every time I have the option to go meeting recorder A, B, or C, or granola, I actually can't wait to click join that meeting. And that sounds strange, doesn't it? That we would be willing for a commoditized space to pay for the product.
Yeah,
What happens then is they get all of the user data, they build the better experience, and on it goes.
exactly. And I think more and more people are waking up to this, that it is that sequence: build the best product, and that, of course, you're afforded less time than in the past. There's an example I recently gave in something I wrote, where Rahul Vora of Superhuman talked about taking up to 3 years to launch the first version of Superhuman. And his belief was that that was the difference between Superhuman being sort of dead on arrival, because they would have shipped prematurely a version of the product that, again, to your point, would have just been easy to discard in favor of Gmail. And the product that eventually has got incredible users and customer love, including myself. I don't think you're afforded that much time today. I think the rate of change is too fast, but there is a continued importance for craftsmanship, and to your point, those small details that add up, where once you've delivered that level of delight, and maybe you can talk about pricing, freemium, and so forth, and you're saying to the customer, okay, I'm gonna take this away from you unless you pay $40 or whatever. You would be surprised, I think, just how many people would say, no, there's no way I can go back to my life before this. And if you can really get that level of usage and engagement, where obviously Granola nowadays is just in the background, you go to your new meeting, it automatically switches to the new meeting recording. I think the lock-in and inertia to switch is extremely high. But of course, that is only going to last as long as you as a company have the talent density and taste to continue delivering those small details. And I think that's a true test of all these companies. We're still very early into this AI native era of software. Some companies have had incredible starts to their lives, but they have to sustain that for 10, 15, 20 years to continue being the company that delivers that best, I guess, packaging of the technology to retain users.
Akash, we've come to the end of the episode. There's one question left from me, and this is more of a personal slant. So we fast forward, let's say 30, 35 years in the future, and you and I are sat next to each other on the kind of proverbial deck chair, and we're looking up. Imagine we're not in London. You can actually see the stars. Imagine we're in Finland. And I turn to the right and ask you, Akash, what was it all for?
That's a great question. Fundamentally, I've believed in technology being a force for good, and startups that become generational companies are a net positive for the world. And I want to dedicate my career basically to helping startups succeed. If I have achieved that in 35 years, I'll have lived a good life. It's important not to overstate the role that we play. It's all about the company. It's all about the management team. There's a tiny, tiny role that investors can play in helping them unlock some issue that helps to get to product market fit, from product market fit to scaling, and so forth and so forth. And as we just said, the company then goes public, and then stays, hopefully, the leading company through a new technology transition. Generational companies, few generational companies, stay market leaders for several technology shifts. That's all to say, I think enabling innovation through startups is a calling, I think, that I am extremely excited about, and would be content to just play a tiny assistance role in doing that. And then I think it's on these great founders who are gonna change the world in ways we can't imagine. 35 years is gonna feel like several lifetimes, I think, especially just because of where we are today in tech. And yeah, if people like you and I can play a small role in these founders realizing that success, I think that would be wonderful.
This has been so much fun. Thanks for joining the show.
Thanks, Joe. It's been fun.